When I first saw Sifu's gameplay, me and a whole bunch of other people instantly thought, oh yeah, this is the second coming of God Hand. Because of that, I needed to play this, but with Elden Ring coming out and then Stranger of Paradise right after, it was going to be a hard sell for Sifu to have me drop one of those two games so I can pick it up instead. But now I do got it, and I can finally see what I missed out on. So let's hop into it. This is Combat Overview. In these series of videos I go over just that, the combat, to be a visual manual in a way and to give a more in-depth look into what a game has to offer, because too many reviews gloss over gameplay, calling it a button masher or giving it the blanket statement. It's like DMC. Before we dive into our options though, I wanted to cover what the game is. So it's a rogue light, and it's crazy for me to think of it that way because Sifu never had those usual hiccups I get from playing these games. But yeah, so how its setup works, you start at age 20, and as you die you'll come back to life on the spot, but at the cost of your lifespan. And then this number pops up which represents how many years will be taken the next time you die. And if you continue to die too often, this number will increase and becoming more punishing until you pass the age of 80, which is game over. And it's a pretty neat system they got going on here. But yeah, you're going to run through a set of 5 stages, all with unique encounters, their own room layouts, and variety of enemies to manage. And throughout you'll find shrines, and every one of those you'll get to choose one buff that'll last throughout your entire run. Like more structure, more health healed on takedowns, parries dealing more structure damage, or a larger focus meter. And while you're here, you can buy moves with your XP. But it's just a down payment to use that new move, because if you restart the stage or game over, it's gone. If you want to keep that new attack for future runs, you need to buy it 5 more times. So depending on its price, you'll probably buy 2 or 3 moves for each full run. But as you keep playing, you'll slowly get more permanent moves to use. Because of all that, it does make it fun to rerun Sifu. Could play through the whole stage, do every encounter to get the most XP, so you can buy more moves and all that. And you can also get all the shrines along the way too, to get those buffs for your run. But all that is at the chance of dying more often and raising your age. Or you could unlock the shortcuts straight to the boss fight to beat the stage at a very low age. But you'll get no XP to spend or any buffs from all those shrines. So it's a cool little risk reward system which makes each run a bit different. Alright, now we can finally get into it. So on square we got our fast light attacks, doing a 5-hit combo. On triangle we got our slower but more powerful heavy attack. And this has a 4-hit combo that'll end with it knocking him down. We can even hold triangle to charge up a punch that'll stun whoever you hit. And if you have a plated weapon, this will instantly take him out. We got delay combos with our heavies, but honestly I rarely use them. So we got a delay after our first heavy that'll do a multi-jab, and a delay after our second heavy which will do a roundhouse. It's pretty cool that we have them, but since heavies are slow and need more time to just come out, and plus with the delays being, well, delays, it takes even more time, and yeah, it's just not really worth it. Plus enemies will either block it or someone will start to attack you from the sides, just straight up preventing any setup. But we can chain into our heavies from light attacks getting different enders. So 2 lights into heavy, we'll have you do a quick push kick, and this one was my go-to because it's a good way to send an enemy away to create space, but it's also a great way to get environmental setups off of walls or ledges for extra damage. 3 lights into heavy will end in a roundhouse, knocking people down. 4 lights into a heavy will do a devastating final hit. Now these I like to use because they're way more reliable to set up because of their speed. We also have unique directional attacks. So if we move the left thumbstick back and then forward plus square, you'll do a push that sends an enemy away. This one is just as good as a push kick for the same reasons. Back, forward with the left thumbstick and then triangle will trip people, and at times more than one person. But yeah, this one's very good to keep them busy on the ground and out of the fight. So instead of doing that slow delays on heavy to get that roundhouse to knock people over, you can just do this instead. So speaking of tripped enemies, so if we hold circle on floored people, you'll pummel them to deal a bit more damage. Good thing about it too, since you crouch down, you're not going to get touched by other people's attacks. You just straight up avoid them, which is pretty cool. And X will have you hop over or climb up things around the room. And this is a good way to break up a crowd to give you more space. But if you press square and X at the same time, we'll grab and toss an enemy away, which helps create space. Super good for crowd control especially. You can also toss them towards someone on the ground, having them fall over each other. This grab toss move can only be done on paired enemies or ones who are stunned or left wide open. so I have to weave or toss in weapons at them. Speaking of which, we'll find pipes, bats, and bladed weapons in each stage. They're strong, but they'll break after some time, having very powerful but simple light or heavy combos. We can also toss our weapon at an enemy with R1. Doing this can interrupt their attack, stun them, and it'll do structure damage. This will heavily damage your weapon, most likely breaking it. So something to keep in mind, either keep the weapon or stun enemies to open them back up again. We'll also find bottles and bricks that'll do the same one-time use toss to stun and all that. Now R1 will also kick little furniture or weapons on the ground towards an enemy, which will lead into a trip or a stun. I can keep going, but we got a lot of more attacks. There's a few moves here to try and figure out how to use them, which is fun. But it could be a double-edged sword since you have to slowly get each one of these, especially since their prices can be a bit too high, since you got them 5 times to permanently unlock them. But once you got a few, it's cool to not only grow by learning the stage layouts and the enemy patterns, but also having the moves to show for it and use against them. Pretty cool, but again, bit of a double-edged sword, especially early on. But alright, let's move on to our defensive options. So R2 will dodge. I don't think he even has iframes, and no perfect dodging either, but it's mainly used to reposition yourself. It will cancel our attacks mid-animation, and on hit or on block 2, so we can move away in a pinch if we have to. If you're tripped and lying on the ground, R2 will have you roll away and get out of there too. After landing a hit on an enemy, you can even dodge into them, which will have you to switch spots. It's good to keep yourself out of crowds or to make sure your back isn't towards those crowds. Holding L1 will have you block, and this will auto turn you to whoever hits you, but definitely can't stay in it forever because that structure will be shredded. But tapping L1 when an enemy attacks will do a parry. It will stagger and sets up for 2 attack follow-ups. Pressing square would have you do a series of quick strikes, or triangle for a bit slower punches, but they'll do more damage to their health and structure. Usually in games, blocking will cancel out our attacks, but not in Sifu. While we may not be able to cancel out our attacks with it, but as long as you're not spamming and you're ready for enemies to attack, you can still parry people back to back if you need to. You can even catch bottles tossed from enemies by tapping L1 at the right timing, which is something you should master for the later boss in the game. But if you don't want to block all day, letting your structure take all the hits, and parries are a bit too much to use regularly to deal with enemies, what you can do are weaves. So while we're blocking with L1, we can move the right thumbstick to maneuver around enemies' attacks. It might look a bit complicated, but you can only do that bob and weave up or down. Up will avoid low attacks, and down, well, for pretty much everything else. So you don't have to worry about weaving left or right, or worry about different attack directions like if they're horizontal or vertical. It's just high or low attacks. And when you weave through enemies' attacks, there will be this very small slow-mo effect to let you know it's your chance to punish them. Now another good thing about it is that it'll lower some of that structure damage you have. And the fact weaves cancel out of our attacks mid-animation, it makes them a very useful tool to use, and a lot. So now we have these defensive options to either block to tank hits, or weave between them to heal our structure as well as expose them for an attack of our own, or parry enemies to deal major structure damage to them once you're more comfortable with their moveset. And of course, having all these options to get around enemies' attacks and all that is pretty damn satisfying. Now in a HUD, we got our health, age, and death counter on the top left, focus meter on the bottom left for special moves, and our structure in the middle. Now I've mentioned structure a few times already, but yeah, this is a very important resource to manage. It determines how many attacks you can block before your guard is completely broken and being open for huge damage. But like I said, just learn those defensive options and you'll be good. To use those special moves, hold L2 and you'll go into the slow down time menu where you'll get to choose a move. And this will give you just enough time to choose an attack that'll interrupt whatever they're about to do. And each move will use 1 or 3 bars. We have moves for each of the melee weapons, one to trip or one to stun. They're just really strong options to quickly set enemies up and to take control of the situation. And to fill up this meter, again, just land hits, successful weaves, and parries. Enemies will have their own structure as well, and just how ours works, guarding attacks, taking damage, and parries will damage it. And once it's broken, it'll open them up for an instant takedown by pressing triangle and circle, which will heal you when you do it. It's also similar to Ninja Gaiden 2 and Stranger of Paradise where you'll be completely invulnerable, So it's a nice little break in the fight to recollect yourself. Just be careful because if you do the instant takedown on specific enemies, they'll go into this comeback powered up mode, which will completely heal them and make them even more powerful. From what I can tell, it's the same enemy every time, so once you learn which one it is, you just gotta avoid doing the takedown on them and you should be fine. Another cool thing is enemies can even hit each other. Like these enemies with bats, for example, weave the first swing, and you can either parry the next attack, but if you weave instead, they'll smack their own people. So depending on the situation, just keep that in mind and you can use this to your advantage. Now if you want to take those weapons away from them, a good way to do it is by shoving or knocking them down, and you can pick up the weapon for yourself. Oh, another quick tip, if enemies parry you, don't panic. They'll even have a pattern to how they'll attack back right after. And once you catch onto that, you can parry their parry. But yeah, that's Sifu. Was it the God Hand successor we needed? I don't know honestly. Sifu is his own thing and that's why I liked it so much. It has a lot of interconnecting tools to learn and master. Enemies were fun to download. Ducking and dodging through whole crowds felt awesome. And the boss is really cool from the look and the patterns. And even just the whole game's art direction is something to just stare at. One thing I would have liked to see though is a mode to have every move unlocked and just run through the entire game with 5 lives or something. And the trade-off is not having any of those shrine buffs to collect or shortcuts to go through. Because after playing Shredder's Revenge arcade mode, they had me liking that kind of setup between the two modes. So yeah, just imagine playing as a prologue Yang just throughout the game basically. And yeah, to put my 2 cents about the whole difficulty thing, it wasn't hard as people made it out to be. In my very first session, I beat the game, and basically 2 days of starting it, I platinumed it. And right after, I beat the game at age 21. So to see them so quickly, I wouldn't say buckle, but to change their vision to appeal to a larger crowd, it's great they want to play it and experience it for themselves, but when you change your game's very handcrafted design to some easy mode that was turned around in a week, you can quickly tell it wasn't meant for it. And those players end up experiencing a lesser version of Sifu. And even 10, I'm sure they still didn't beat it. But yeah, that's just my view on it. I sided with the devs more often to stand by their game and believe in the art they made, rather than have it be changed and altered to appease others. You're not going to go tell Capcom to make DMC easier, right? And have something that'll make it so that you don't have to interact with any of his tools and mechanics so people can play it. Oh no.